question you have probably been afraid to ask out loud. Whether self-love is a trap of the ego or the beginning of freedom. A king brought a version of that question to the Buddha 2,500 years ago, and his answer opens this video. By the end, 3 things will be yours. The Buddha's actual answer to the question. A practice you can begin tonight, in the chair you are sitting in. And a different way of speaking to yourself, more like a friend than a foreman. The people around you will notice the third one before you do. The people you love are in good hands. Yours. The friend on the phone, the parent, the colleague, each met someone careful and kind. The one who has not met that person yet today is you. Loving yourself is not selfish. It is the ground from which not harming anyone else becomes possible. Without that ground, kindness becomes a slow leak. 12 teachings ahead. 2 acrobats on a bamboo pole. 8 winds blowing through every life. A line from the Dhammapada that may sound exactly like a friend. Wherever in the world you are listening from, it is good to be here together. It is evening 2,500 years ago. The lamps in a king's house have just been lit. The king is tired. He has spent the day being feared, which is a tiring thing. He sits down beside his queen and asks her something he has been carrying around all afternoon. It is not a kingly question. Kings are not supposed to need this kind of reassurance. Pasanadi has been carrying it anyway, the way tired people carry quiet questions all day, the way you have been carrying yours. Is there anyone in the world, he asks her, dearer to you than yourself? The king is hoping for the answer that will let him sleep. Of course, you, my king. The reassurance kings have always wanted from queens. Malika takes her time. The courtyard goes quiet around them. She looks at her king. And then she answers, simply, no. No, my king. There is no one in the world dearer to me than myself. Malika has been married long enough to know the difference between the answer that flatters and the answer that frees. She chooses the one that frees. That answer is the doorway we enter together. In the next few minutes, 3 things land. The reason Malika's sentence is canonical and not heretical. The honest name for what your body has been writing down all week. And the question that opens the rest of this video. Malika is being precise. She loves her king as much as she did that morning. What she is doing is telling him, in the privacy of their evening, what is true for every living being who has ever asked the question seriously. Look inside any heart that beats in any body. You do not find anyone dearer than the one whose heart it is. The implication of that single sentence is enormous. Every other being you have ever met, every person you have ever cared for, every face you have ever seen on the street is the dearest thing to itself. Your child is the dearest thing to your child. Your parent is the dearest thing to your parent. The friend on the phone tonight is the dearest thing to the friend on the phone tonight. Malika's sentence does not just describe her. It describes the architecture of every heart in every body across every life. The truth has been in you too. You have been Malika in the moment before she spoke. Knowing it, afraid to say it out loud. Suspicious that to admit it would be selfish, arrogant, dangerous, a kind of betrayal of the people you have been carrying. It is the simplest fact about the heart that beats in your chest. The body in this room is the dearest thing to itself, and you have been treating it as if it were not. The phone has been ringing all week. The friend has been calling. The parent has been worrying. The colleague has been needing reassurance. Each one met someone careful, patient, kind. The one who has not met that person yet today is the one whose breath you can hear right now, if you slow down enough to listen. Notice the shoulders. They have been holding something all day they were not built to hold. Different from work tiredness. The other kind. The kind that comes from being available, hour after hour, while quietly forgetting that someone in the room was waiting for the same kindness from the same hands. You. Notice the slight clench in the jaw, even now. The shallow breath that has been the default for so long that a deep breath feels foreign when you try it. The faint headache that arrives whenever you stop moving. The brittleness in the voice when someone catches you off guard. These are the body's quiet receipts for what has been spent without being replaced. Most people never take this look. They go through entire decades being the careful one, the available one, the one everyone calls, and they never pause to notice that the inhabitant of their own body has been waiting at the back of the queue all along. The body grows quieter. The smallness deepens. The person becomes, over years, a kind of skillful absence at the center of their own life. Tonight is the night that pattern is interrupted. Not by force, by a single honest look. There is a particular smallness that grows in someone who has been the careful one for too long without being met with the same care. It does not look like resentment. It looks like efficiency. The careful one stops asking for things, stops mentioning what they need, stops believing, at the level the belief actually operates, that what they need is real. The smallness is what makes a person able to keep giving for years without anyone noticing how thin they have become on the inside. The smallness shows up in tiny moments most people do not register as related. Standing at the cupboard at midnight choosing the cracker because the meal would have asked too much. Apologizing for taking up time on a phone call that the other person initiated. saying I am fine when the body has not been fine for weeks. Each small move is the smallness keeping its job, running the careful one efficiently into the ground. Malika did not have that smallness. Malika knew exactly what she was worth. The king, when he heard her answer, did not punish her for the knowing. He did something more interesting. He sat with what she said. He turned it over. And then he took the question to the Buddha. We come back to that meeting in the third teaching with the care it deserves. For now, what matters is the canonical fact. The Buddha did not contradict Malika. He confirmed her, which means the question your body has been writing down for months is allowed. The question is canonical. The Buddha himself answered it. Your body has been waiting for someone to say so. He did more than confirm her. He used her sentence to teach a king something the king had been afraid was true. The teaching is recorded in the Sutta Nikaya in fewer than 30 words. Those 30 words are the doorway into every practice in this video. They are also the answer your body has been quietly listening for. There is a small, secret belief that has been operating in you while no one was looking. The belief is something like this. You are the one who shows up. That is who you are. That is what you do. That is the structure of your life, and there is no point asking it to be otherwise. If anyone said this belief to you out loud, you would push back. You would say, "Of course I take care of myself. Of course I rest. Of course I matter." And you would mean it. The body, which has been keeping the actual record, would have a slightly different report. Here is what changes the moment that record is allowed to be read. The shoulders set down a degree. The breath finds a slightly longer line. A small, almost private permission begins to operate underneath everything else. Permission to be tired. Permission to need something. Permission to take up the room you have been quietly trying not to take up. The change is not loud. It does not show up in any photograph. It shows up in the body of someone who has finally stopped pretending they were not in the room. This is the first teaching. The first honest look. A noticing, nothing more. The looking itself is the door the next 11 teachings walk through. What begins now is not the practices. The practices arrive in a few minutes. What begins now is letting the room around you contain a person you have been moving around as though they were furniture. There is a particular kind of silence that opens in a person when they finally let themselves be seen by themselves. It is not dramatic. It is not heroic. It is the silence of a room that has been crowded for years, finally containing the person who lives in it. That admission is the precondition for everything that follows. Without it, the next 11 teachings will land on you as instructions. One more thing to do. One more demand on the hours of an already full life. With it, the teachings will land in the place they were always meant to land, which is the very voice in your head that has been narrating this all along. The voice that decides, in any given moment, whether you matter. The voice you have been listening to all day. You should have done more. That is the kind of sentence the voice in your head says, in some version, 100 times a day. You should have stayed longer. You should have remembered. You should have been more patient. You should not have eaten that. You should be over this by now. The voice does not raise itself. It says the thing at the volume of a thought, and you absorb it at the speed of a breath. This teaching gives you 3 things before it ends. The reason the voice in your head sounds the way it does. The exact mechanism by which it gets retrained. And the small daily move that begins the retraining tonight. Most people try to fight this voice. They argue with it, refute it, tell it to shut up. The fighting makes the voice stronger. Tonight, we begin somewhere else. If anyone else spoke to you the way that voice does, you would have stopped taking their calls long ago. If a friend addressed their own thinking out loud to you the way you address yours silently to yourself, you would gently say, "Please, be a little kinder to yourself." You would mean it. When the voice is your own, directed at you, heard only by you, something strange happens. It does not register as cruelty. It registers as honesty. It registers as the truth. And you accept 100 times a day a treatment from yourself you would refuse from anyone else in the world. The voice runs the inside of your week. It narrates the morning before the day has begun. It commentates on every conversation while you are still in it. It replays whatever did not go well at 3 in the afternoon and again at 9 at night. It is the loudest thing in your inner life, and it is also the thing you have been most willing to believe without question. Here is the first thing this teaching delivers. The voice is not the truth. The voice is a habit. The Dhammapada, 2,500 years ago, opened with this very point. Mind precedes all states. Mind is their chief. They are mind-made. The verse is not abstract. The voice you have been speaking to yourself in is the voice that produces the next moment of your inner life. Not the next year, the next breath, the next thought, the next twitch of feeling in the chest. If the voice has been hard, the next moment will be hard. If the voice has been kind, the next moment will be a little easier. Buddhism is not asking you to believe this. It is asking you to test it. Now, the deeper question. Why does the kind voice feel foreign when you would never make a home for anyone else from the same materials the harsh voice makes for you. Buddhist teaching has a precise word for what is happening. Anusaya. A habit that has become a groove, a tendency lying beneath the surface of awareness, ready to wake at the first opportunity. The way a sleeping dog wakes at the first footstep, even when it has been silent for hours. Your harsh inner voice is an anusaya. It has been there a long time, probably formed before you had any say in the matter. A child who is repeatedly criticized builds a small inner critic to do the work in advance, so the world cannot catch them off guard. A teenager who learned that being seen meant being judged builds a voice that preempts the judgment by saying it first. A grown person who has spent years caring for everyone else builds a voice that does not even let the question of self-care into the room without first labeling it indulgent. The voice was useful once. It was protection. It said the harsh thing first, so that nothing the world said could land any harder. That is worth pausing on. The cruelty of your inner voice is the residue of an old protection. Someone in you, at some age, trying to keep you safe. The protection is no longer protection. It is now the wound itself. The voice has long since stopped saving you from anything in the world and started doing the work the world used to do. It does not know that. It is still on the job. It is the most loyal employee you have ever had. Showing up first thing in the morning, staying late, never asking for a raise, still calling you names from the 8th grade. Here is the second thing this teaching delivers. The mechanism by which the voice is retrained. Forcing the voice to be quiet only sends it underground, where it gets sneakier and more chronic. The voice has to be relieved of its post. Slowly, by being given less and less work to do. By a different voice gradually moving in, the way a new tenant moves into a house while the old tenant is still finding their boxes. The new voice is quieter than the old one. It does not announce itself. It does not argue with the old voice. It just begins to operate alongside it, a little more steadily, a little more often, a little more like a friend. Here is the third thing this teaching delivers. The small daily move that begins the retraining tonight. You will notice it happening in very small moments. A friend cancels plans, and the old voice starts to say something about how you must have done something wrong, and a slightly newer voice in the same head says, "They are tired. They will be in touch." You make a small mistake at work, and the old voice begins its familiar speech about your character, and a quieter voice says, "That was a mistake, not a verdict." You eat something you wish you had not, and the old voice begins its lecture, and the new voice says, "You were tired and you wanted comfort, and that is what humans do." Each time the new voice answers, it gets stronger. Each time it answers without arguing, the household begins to belong a little more to it. Most people never realize how much of their inner life is being shaped by a voice that has been on autopilot for decades. The voice is not loud, which is part of why it has gone unchallenged. The voice has been the soundtrack of every quiet moment of your life. When you finally notice it, something shifts that nothing else can shift. You realize the voice has been one possibility, not a fact. Possibility is editable. Fact is not. The old teachers had a phrase for this kind of training. They called the harsh voice the mind one inherits. They called the new voice the mind one trains. Inheritance is what was given to you without your consent. Training is what you give yourself, on purpose, over years. Both are real. Only one is up to you. Most people live their entire lives inside the inheritance. They never notice that the voice was given to them by people who themselves were given a similar voice. By people who themselves were given a similar voice, back through generations of people who were treated by the same kind of voice and never got to choose otherwise. Tonight you choose. Not by force. By beginning to feed a slightly different voice the kind of attention the harsh one has been getting for free. Here is what changes the first night you let a different sentence land where the old one usually does. The chest opens a small, almost imperceptible degree. The shoulders drop. The breath finds a slightly longer line. The body recognizes that the voice it shares the room with has, for a moment, stopped being its enemy. The recognition is small. The recognition is also the beginning of an entire different inner climate. So when the voice says, as it has probably already said while you have been listening to this, something like, I should be better at this by now, notice it. Do not argue. Do not agree. Just say, internally, the smallest possible response. Yes, I hear you. Let me think about that later. Then return to your breath. The voice will say something else in a moment. Notice that one too. Continue the practice. The voice does not get the fight it was expecting. It does not get the agreement it was hoping for. What it gets, for the first time in a long time, is a calm acknowledgement from someone who is not joining its drama. Over weeks, the voice quietens. The forest creature begins to doze near the fire instead of pacing the perimeter. What gets retrained over months is not just the voice. What gets retrained is your sense of whether you are someone worth being kind to. The voice has been the one telling you no. A new voice begins, very quietly, to tell you yes. The yes is what the next teaching is built on. It is the yes that lay underneath Malika's answer to her king. It is the yes the Buddha confirmed when the king brought him the question. The third teaching delivers the Buddha's actual sentence. The question itself becomes, for the first time in a long time, answerable. It It is morning, 2,500 years ago. An old man is walking slowly toward where the Buddha is staying. His name is Mettā. He is a householder, not a monk, not a king, just an ordinary man, old now, with a body that has begun to fail him. The morning is bright. The road is dusty. The old man has had to stop twice to rest before he reaches the small monastery where the Buddha is staying for the rains. He has been thinking about something all night, the way old men do when the body keeps them awake with its small failures. He has rehearsed the question in his head and dropped it twice as too much to ask. Now he is here. He has been a husband for many decades. He has been a father. He has spent a long life caring for his family, paying his taxes, doing the things householders do. Now the body is broken. The strength is gone. Most days hurt in ways that did not hurt before. He comes to the Buddha and says, in the canon's own words, something like this: Lord, I am old, aged, burdened with years. My body is afflicted. Please give me a teaching that will benefit me for a long time. The Buddha receives him the way the Buddha receives anyone who has come a long way to ask one true question. No ceremony, no correction, no suggestion that the question should have been asked sooner. Just attention. The kind of attention an old man has not been given in a long time, in a household where everyone needs something from him. This is the moment we are dwelling within. In the next few minutes, 3 things land. The Buddha's exact answer to a man who has nothing left to give. The doctrine that confirms what your body has been waiting to hear. And the bridge into the practice that begins in the next teaching, in the chair you are sitting in. Most people who come to the Buddha in the canon are healthy monks with time on their hands. Mettā is different. He is who the canon does not always foreground. The tired householder. The person who has carried. The person who has given so much for so long that there is barely a body left to ask the question with. He is also, for our purposes tonight, you. The Buddha looks at the old man. He does not give him a long discourse. He gives him one sentence. Train yourself thus, the Buddha says. Though my body is afflicted, my mind shall not be afflicted. That is the entire teaching. Hear it again, in your own voice this time. Though my body is afflicted, my mind shall not be afflicted. The Buddha is not telling Mettā his body will heal. Bodies do not heal indefinitely. Bodies wear down. What the Buddha is offering is something different. A separation of 2 things that have been entangled. The body that is afflicted and the mind that does not have to be. Later, the Buddha's chief disciple Sariputta walked Mettā home. the old man asked him to unpack the teaching. What did the Buddha mean? Sariputta explained, in his careful way. The body is afflicted when one identifies with the changing parts of experience as if they were the self. The mind is not afflicted when one notices the changing parts and does not collapse into them. Translate that into the language your body knows. The body has been tired all week. That tiredness is real. The mind has been collapsing into the tiredness, believing the tiredness was the self, believing the carrying was who you are. The Buddha's teaching is that the carrying is not the self. The mind that watches the carrying is the self. And that mind can be trained, over time, not to collapse. The teaching is also a precise reframing of what self-care actually is. Most people imagine self-care as a list of soft activities. A bath, a walk, a nap. Those things are real and useful. The Buddha is offering something underneath them. Self-care is the ongoing, daily, mostly invisible work of training the mind not to identify with every signal the body sends about how the day is going. The bath is fine. The walk is fine. The deeper care is the inner climate that meets the bath and the walk, and also meets the morning when there is no time for either. Most people never make this separation. The body is afflicted, and the mind goes down with it. The afternoon ache becomes proof that the day is ruined. The week of poor sleep becomes proof that the year is unsalvageable. The chronic stiffness in the lower back becomes proof that the inhabitant of the body is failing at being a person. Each time the body has a bad hour, the mind ratifies the bad hour as a verdict on the whole life. The Buddha is showing Nakulapita and showing you tonight that the ratification is the part that can be untrained. Here is what this delivers for the question your body has been carrying all video. Self-love, in the Buddhist canon, is not a feeling you have to manufacture. It is the practice of caring for the mind that survives the body's exhaustion. The mind that has been listening, registering, keeping records, while the body did the work. That mind is the thing the Buddha said you must train yourself to protect. The teaching is precise. The body will be afflicted. Bodies are. The world will keep asking. What the world cannot reach, if you train yourself, is the inner climate you are growing in the room with you. You are Nakulapita tonight in the way that matters. Your body has been afflicted in a more modern way than his was, afflicted by being available to everyone for too long without enough being given back. The Buddha's instruction to him is also his instruction to you. The mind shall not be afflicted, even when the body has been, even when the day has been, even when the year has been. Notice what the body does when that instruction lands. A small, almost imperceptible loosening. The shoulders set down a degree. The breath finds a slightly longer line. The recognition that the work of self-care is not about fixing the body's weariness. It is about keeping the mind kind while the body recovers in its own slow way. Here is what the practice looks like in a single, ordinary day. The body wakes up tired. The mind has a choice. The mind can collapse into the tiredness and decide the day is already over. Or the mind can notice the tiredness, name it as the body's report, and stay with the listener inside the body who is hearing the report. The body is still tired in either case. The day is different in the two cases. Multiplied across thousands of small choices, over months, the difference between those two minds is the difference between two entire lives. So what does the training look like? The Buddha gave Nakulapita the principle. Train yourself. The training itself is what the next teaching delivers. 4 short phrases the old teachers in the Theravada lineage have offered for 2,500 years to anyone who showed up tired, who did not know where to begin. The phrases turn the principle into a practice you can begin tonight, in the chair you are sitting in, with the body that has carried you here. There is also a quieter thing the Nakulapita story offers. A kind of permission. The Buddha did not scold the old man for asking. He did not tell him he should have come earlier. He did not tell him the question was selfish. The Buddha received an old householder's tired honesty and gave him a sentence that fit on a single breath. If the Buddha received Nakulapita in that way, he is also receiving you in that way. The question is not too late. The teaching is not reserved for monks. It was given, in the canon's own pages, to a tired householder who could not have known his sentence would still be in someone's ear 2,500 years later. Yours. Nakulapita went home that day with a single sentence in his ear. The sentence outlived him. It outlived the empire he was a citizen of. It is in your ear now. Train yourself thus. Though my body is afflicted, my mind shall not be afflicted. The training begins in the next teaching, with 4 short phrases that fit on a single breath each. The same phrases the old teachers offered for everyone who came after Nakulapita. Tonight you join them. Find your hand. Bring it to your own chest. Let the palm rest where you can feel a small, steady movement that has been keeping you alive since long before you remember being alive. This is where the practice begins. Not in a meditation cushion. Not in a special hour. In the chair you are sitting in, with the hand you have on the chest you have. This teaching gives you 3 things before it ends. The 4 phrases you can begin saying tonight. The reason the practice begins with you and not with anyone else. And the small mechanism by which a body that has been spoken to kindly stops being a body at war with itself. Without it, every other practice the canon offers becomes another job for the careful one to perform. With it, the rest of the path becomes possible. Most people who hear about loving kindness practice do it wrong. They start by trying to send metta to a difficult colleague, or to a person who has hurt them, or to all beings in all directions at once. The practice has no chance. The well is dry. Tonight, we begin where the well actually exists. The practice was given by the Buddha in a teaching called the Mettā Sutta. A mother, the sutta says, would protect her only child with her life. Even so, let one cultivate a boundless heart toward all beings. The metaphor of the mother is not chosen casually. A mother does not love her child because the child has earned it. A mother does not measure the love against what the child returns. The love is given without account keeping, moment by moment, for as long as the child is alive. The sutta is offering the same quality of regard, turned in every direction, beginning with the one direction most people never think to turn it: inward. Stop and notice what it means. The kind of regard a mother gives her only child, applied to the body in this room. No requirement, no measurement, no conditions. Most people have not been looked at this way by anyone in years. Many have not been looked at this way ever. Tonight, for the duration of 4 phrases, they are. The old commentaries, particularly Buddhaghosa's instructions in the Visuddhimagga, made this explicit. The practice begins with the one body doing the practicing. Yours. The reason is mechanical. You cannot send out a wish you are not generating. If the body that produces the wish has not received the wish first, the wish has nowhere to come from. So the old teachers said, begin with yourself. Begin where the warmth actually exists. The quality of attention these phrases ask for is unusual, quieter than insistence. The attention you would give a sleeping child if you wanted them not to wake. The body recognizes that quality even before the words do. Forcing the practice breaks the spell. Skimming past it does not reach the body being addressed. The practice itself is the kindness. The phrases are how the kindness gets a shape. Each repetition refines the shape a little further. Here are the 4 phrases. Each fits on a single breath. Each is offered inwardly, directed at the body in this room. May I be safe. Let that sentence sit on the chest under the palm. Do not analyze it. Do not check whether you mean it. Do not check whether you deserve it. The phrase is doing its work whether or not the voice in your head approves. Notice if it sounds like a lie. If it does, notice that the lie is in the listener, not in the sentence. The sentence is true. Safety is something everybody deserves. The listener inside you, who has been told for years that asking for safety was selfish, is the part of you that is being slowly corrected, one breath at a time. Notice if the body has shifted at all. A small softening at the back of the neck. A breath that is 1 centimeter deeper than the last. The body recognizing the phrase before the mind has decided whether to believe it. May I be well. There is sometimes a small, almost imperceptible response in the chest under the hand. Quieter than enthusiasm. A small acknowledgement from a part of you that did not know it was being included in the conversation. May I be at ease. This third phrase is often the hardest for people who have spent their lives being useful. Ease feels like something you have to earn. Ease feels like a vacation rather than something the body is already entitled to. The phrase asks for something the voice in your head has refused to allow. Let it be asked anyway. Let the phrase open the door even if the inner critic refuses to walk through it. May I be free from suffering. This last one is the canonical wish at the heart of the entire practice. An old wish, spoken by countless practitioners, in countless rooms, in countless centuries, in every language Buddhism has ever traveled into. When you say it, you are joining a long line of human beings who decided, at some point in their lives, that the wish was for them too. Take a few slow breaths now, with the hand still on the chest. Let the 4 phrases cycle gently in the body, at whatever pace feels possible. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be at ease. May I be free from suffering. If something rises in response, tightness, awkwardness, a small ache in the throat, a tear that you did not see coming that is part of the practice, the body has been waiting for these phrases. The body responds when it hears them, sometimes with relief, sometimes with grief, sometimes with a quiet bewilderment that anyone is finally talking to it kindly. There is something the canon notices about this practice that is worth carrying. The body that has been receiving harsh internal sentences for years has been bracing, in some quiet way, against its own inhabitant. The 4 phrases are the first signal in a long time that the inhabitant is on the body's side. The bracing, over weeks of practice, begins to release. What is left is a body that finally trusts the person living inside it. That trust is not a small thing. Most chronic tension in a long, tired body is a body waiting for someone in there to be kind. If you feel resistance, that is also part of the practice. The harsh voice from the second teaching may show up here. It may say, "Who do you think you are?" It may say, "This is silly." It may say, "This is for other people who have time for it." Notice the voice. Continue the phrases anyway. The phrases do not require the voice's permission. Here is the small mechanism that is actually happening. Every time you direct the 4 phrases inward, a small circuit in the heart-mind is being trained. The circuit is the one that decides whether you are a being to be cared for or a being to be ignored. Most people have spent their lives running the second circuit. The phrases are how the first circuit gets practice. Over weeks, the first circuit gets stronger. Over months, the body begins to default to it more often. Over years, the inner life of the practitioner shifts in ways visible to the people around them, long before they are visible to themselves. The phrases work slowly. They do not transform you on the first reading. What they do is shift the climate of your inner life, a degree at a time, over weeks and months. Said before sleep, they soften the night. Said in traffic, they widen the small space between event and reaction. Said during a difficult conversation, they remind you that the difficult person across from you is also a being to whom this wish can be extended. The Buddha's teaching mentions 11 natural benefits of regular metta practice. Sleeping peacefully, waking peacefully, dreaming pleasantly, being dear to humans, being dear to non-humans. The list is long because the change is real. The change does not show up in any photograph. It shows up in the texture of the days. A morning that feels lighter than yesterday's. A conversation that did not flatten you the way the same conversation would have a month ago. A small, almost private sense of being on your own side when nothing in particular has happened. These are the changes the practice produces. They do not arrive as fireworks. They arrive as climate. There will be days when the phrases feel hollow. The voice will tell you that you are wasting your time, that nothing is happening, that you should be doing something more concrete. The phrases are doing their work even on hollow days. In the same way, water keeps shaping a stone, whether or not the stone notices. Tonight, for now, all you are being asked to do is offer the 4 phrases once, with your own hand on your own chest, in your own room, as a small, private inauguration of the practice. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be at ease. May I be free from suffering. When the phrases settle, something is left behind. A slight softening. A small recognition. A body that has been spoken to kindly, possibly for the first time in a long time. The body knows what to do with that. The body has been waiting. The next teaching joins you there, inside the body itself, in the place where the day's tiredness has been quietly accumulating, with the precise practice the Buddha taught for meeting whatever rises there without flinching from it. Feelings last seconds. Suffering lasts hours. The difference between the two is what your mind has been adding to the original feeling for as long as you can remember. The Buddha had 3 words for what is actually there before the mind starts adding. pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. That short list is the entire opening vocabulary of one of the most important practices in the canon. 3 categories. Nothing more. Yet most of the suffering you have lived inside of this week is built out of the mind's refusal to leave the list at 3. This teaching gives you 3 things before it ends. The Buddha's exact word for what the body has been reporting all day. The single second of practice that interrupts the mind's habit of adding. And the small mechanism by which a feeling that has been held for years stops being held. Most people fight their feelings. They push away the unpleasant. They grasp at the pleasant. They run from the neutral. The fighting is what produces most of the suffering they are trying to escape. Tonight, we begin a different practice. The Buddha called it Vedana. Vedana is the basic feeling tone of any moment of experience, sorted by the canon into the same 3 buckets you have already met. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. The simplicity is the point. Most people experience their inner life as a tangle of named emotions, each with its own color and story. Underneath those colors, the canon insists, are only 3 feeling tones. The story is what the mind adds. The tone is what the body has. The practice strips the tangle back to the tone. Most people never make this distinction. The body sends a signal. The mind absorbs it and adds a story. The story becomes the new reality. A tight chest becomes proof the meeting will go badly. A heavy stomach becomes proof that the relationship is doomed. The body's actual report is buried under the story the mind is telling. Tonight, we begin to separate them again. The practice is to notice, in any given moment, which of the 3 is present. Not to fix it. Not to argue with it. Not to amplify the pleasant or push away the unpleasant. Just to know which one is there, the way you might know what the weather is outside without insisting it be different. This sounds almost too simple to be a Buddhist teaching. It is the second of the 4 foundations of mindfulness in the Satipatthana Sutta, right after the body itself. When the canon ranks something second on a list of 4, the teaching is not optional. Here is why. The harshness in your inner life is not built directly out of events. It is built out of your relationship to the feeling tone of those events. Something pleasant arrives, and you grasp it. Something unpleasant arrives, and you push it away. Something neutral arrives, and you go looking for something more interesting. All 3 reactions create the same outcome, a body in motion against the moment that is here. When you stop reacting and start noticing, the body has somewhere to land. Pleasant becomes pleasant, received, let go of as it passes. Unpleasant becomes unpleasant, received, let go of as it passes. Neutral becomes neutral, received, allowed to be ordinary. Try it now. Pick the most uncomfortable feeling that has been with you today. Notice it. Notice the temperature of it. Notice whether it is heavy or light, wide or narrow, still or moving. Notice, using the only vocabulary the practice asks for, whether it is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Probably unpleasant. That is fine. Unpleasant is the right word. The work is to let the feeling be unpleasant, in the body that is also yours, while the inhabitant of that body sits with it kindly. Here is what long-time practitioners eventually report. When you stop fighting the unpleasant, it changes. The discomfort that has been held in place by your resistance to it is no longer being held there. It begins, on its own, to soften. Sometimes it dissolves. Sometimes it shifts to another part of the body. Sometimes it stays, with more space around it than it had before. Most of the chronic discomfort in a long, tired body is not the original feeling. It is the years of resistance to the feeling. The original feeling lasted seconds. The resistance has been sustained for years. When the resistance softens, what disappears first is the layer that has been added. What is left is the original feeling, which the body knows how to process if it is allowed to. The resistance has been quiet. The body has been bracing, minute by minute, against signals it was not allowed to receive cleanly. A breath that did not get to finish. A grief that was not allowed to be grief. A small wave of overwhelm that was named lazy and pushed under. Each of those bracings stayed in the body. The accumulation is what people call burnout when they are looking for a word for it. This is what the Buddha was pointing at. The feeling itself is not the problem. Your relationship to the feeling is the problem. Once you change the relationship, the feeling becomes, at last, a guest in the house rather than a thief. Notice what this changes in a single ordinary moment. Frustration arrives mid-conversation. The old habit is to fight it or be carried away. The new practice is 1 second of noticing. Unpleasant is here. Unpleasant will pass. That single second, repeated dozens of times a day, rewires the way a week feels. The Vedana Sayutta in the canon spends an entire collection of suttas on this distinction. Feeling tied to the small, reactive self is what produces suffering. The same feeling, noticed without that reaction, does not. The feeling itself is the same. The freedom is in the noticing. What the practice asks of you in the next few weeks is small. Several times a day, when you remember, notice what feeling tone is present. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Do not interpret, Do not narrate. Do not move to fix or amplify. Just notice. The noticing itself is the practice. Over time, the body learns it is allowed to feel. Allowed to be tired without being scolded for the tiredness. Allowed to be sad without being asked to explain. Allowed to be neutral without being prodded into something more useful. This is the opposite of the message most of us inherited about feeling. The inherited message was that feelings were inconvenient. Things to manage, hide, or fix. The early Buddhist teaching is that the way out of suffering runs through the feeling, not around it. Going around the feeling is what most modern self-care actually does. A bath while the unpleasant feeling waits at the door of the bathroom. A walk while the anxiety walks alongside. A show while the sadness sits on the couch behind you. The bath is fine. The walk is fine. The show is fine. What actually changes the climate is meeting the feeling somewhere along the way at last, instead of avoiding it for yet another hour or two. Consider what this means for the kind of self-care that does not buy candles. When you are tired, notice the tiredness as unpleasant, and let it be unpleasant without immediately reaching for the phone or the snack. The tiredness softens when allowed to be tiredness. When you are anxious, notice the anxiety as unpleasant and let it be unpleasant without believing the stories it tells about why it is here. The anxiety softens when allowed to be anxiety. When something pleasant arrives, notice it as pleasant and let it pass without grasping. There is a particular kind of relief that comes when the body discovers it is allowed to feel. Until it is given permission, the body is using a great deal of its quiet energy to suppress sensations it has been told are inconvenient. Suppression is not free. It costs the body in tightness, in fatigue, in the small physical signs of long-term carrying. When the suppression is allowed to relax, even for a few minutes, the energy that was being spent on holding the feeling down becomes available for living. Notice, as this space unfolds, what is happening in the body that is yours. The shoulders may have softened a little. The breath may be slightly longer than it was a few minutes ago. The chest may feel a degree less guarded, not because we have done anything to it, but because we have stopped doing things to it. The body responds to being noticed. The body has wanted to be noticed for a long time. Tonight is the first night, in many, that it is being noticed without being managed. When the noticing has settled, there will be one more guest worth meeting in this practice. The harshest guest of all. The voice in the head that does not respond to the same kindness the body does. The next teaching addresses that voice, with a different practice and a precise teaching from a teacher who knew the voice better than most. If a thing can be fixed, fix it. If it cannot be fixed, find peace with it. Either way, the harshness in your head adds nothing. That is a paraphrase of one of the most useful sentences ever written about inner suffering. It was written in northern India in the 8th century by a Mahayana monk named Shantideva. His book, the Bodhicharyavatara, is still being read by anyone serious about working with their own mind. The sentence is from chapter 6, on patience. The previous teaching trained you to meet the body's feelings. The voice in your head is a different problem. The voice is faster than feeling. The voice is sneakier. The voice is the part of you that has been arguing with you the longest, and arguing with it directly only makes it louder. This teaching gives you 3 things before it ends. Shantideva's exact logic for why the harshness in your head is irrelevant to anything you are trying to fix. The image from the Thai forest tradition that explains why the voice has stayed loud for so long. And the small, practical move for meeting the voice in a way it has never been met before. Sit with Shantideva's logic for a moment. If the thing the voice is criticizing you for is something you can change, the work is to change it. The harshness about it is just extra weight on top of the work. If the thing is something you cannot change, the work is to find peace with it. The harshness about it is just extra weight on top of the acceptance. Either way, the harshness has no job to do. It is not motivating you. It is not making the situation better. It is doing nothing useful. All it is doing is adding a second layer of suffering on top of whatever the original difficulty was. The original difficulty, whatever it was, has now been doubled. This is a precision tool. Whenever the voice begins one of its standard speeches, the question to ask is one of 2. Can this be fixed? If yes, the work is the fixing. If no, the work is the peace. Either way, the voice's contribution is not in the question. Try the logic on something specific. The voice is replaying a conversation from this morning. Can the conversation be changed? No. So the work is to find peace with the version that happened. The harshness about it, repeated all afternoon, changes nothing. The voice is rehearsing something you did badly last week. Can it be improved going forward? Yes. So the work is to make the next version better. The harshness about the previous one contributes nothing to the next. Most people skip this question. They get into a wrestling match with the voice instead. They argue. They refute. They tell it to shut up. The voice gets louder every time. It has been winning the wrestling match for years. Most people never make peace with the voice. They live their entire lives inside a wrestling match they cannot remember starting. The voice gets the last word at night. It gets the first word every morning. Decades of this leaves a person tired in ways sleep cannot fix. Tonight you step out of it. Not by winning the match, by stopping it. Ajahn Chah, a Thai forest teacher who lived in the 20th century had an image for what is happening. The mind is a wild forest creature. Chase it, and it runs deeper into the forest. Fight it, and it bites. Starve it, and it gets meaner. The only way to bring a wild creature close is to sit very still in a clearing, with food in your hand, and let it choose to come to you. The voice in your head is a wild creature. It has been chased, argued with, shamed, ignored, and occasionally agreed with, but never simply met. When you begin to meet it without fighting it, the creature becomes confused. It is used to being engaged. Being witnessed without engagement is something it has not encountered before. The practice for meeting the voice is not complicated, though it is patient. When the voice says, "You should have done more," you do not argue with it. You do not say back, "I did enough." You do not say, "Shut up." You say, internally, something like, "I hear you. Yes, I notice you are saying that again." And then you continue with whatever you were doing. The voice does not get the fight it was expecting. It does not get the agreement it was hoping for. What it gets, for the first time in a long time, is a calm acknowledgement from someone who is not joining its drama. The mechanism is precise. The voice is built to provoke a response. Argument feeds it. Agreement feeds it. Shame feeds it. A calm acknowledgement is the one input it does not know how to escalate. Over time, the lines lose their charge. The wild creature has nothing to chase. Notice what happens to the room around the voice when this practice begins. The room becomes larger. The voice, when it is not being fought, shrinks back into being one voice in the room rather than the entire room. You begin to feel space between you and the voice, the way a tired person feels space between themselves and a difficult guest at a dinner party who is no longer the center of the evening. The space changes everything. The space is what was missing. Over weeks, the voice quietens. The forest creature begins to doze near the fire instead of pacing the perimeter. There is one more piece of Shantideva's chapter on patience that is worth carrying. He wrote, in another famous line, that whatever joy there is in this world, all comes from desiring others to be happy. Whatever suffering there is in this world, all comes from desiring oneself to be happy. That second sentence is often misread. Shantideva is not saying that you should not desire your own happiness. He is saying that the small, grasping kind of self-focus, the kind that says, I should be further along, I should be better, I should be different from how I am, is the engine of suffering. The harsh inner voice is exactly that engine, running all day, producing heat and exhaust and very little forward motion. What replaces the engine is patience. The willingness to let yourself be where you are, on the day you are on, with the body you have, with the mind you have, with the small mistakes you have already made today and the small mistakes you will probably make tomorrow. Patience is not resignation. Patience is the steady seeing that you cannot improve from a position of self-attack and that the work begins only when the attacking stops. Try this for these next few moments. When the voice arrives with its next sentence, notice it. Acknowledge it. Do not argue. Do not agree. Just say, internally, the smallest possible response, something like, "Yes, I hear you. Let me think about that later." Then return to your breath. Return to the hands still on the chest. Return to the 4 phrases if they are nearby. The voice will say something else in a moment. Notice that one too. Continue the practice. Over weeks, what you discover is that the voice was not as solid as you thought. It was a habit performing as a personality. When the habit is met without being fed, the personality begins to loosen. The dry voice that used to fill every silent moment finds it has less to say. The voice loses its monopoly. Other voices begin to be heard underneath it. The voice that knows what you need. The voice that is on your side. The harsh voice becomes one voice in a household that now has more than one inhabitant. If you have been at war with the voice for years, this teaching can feel like a peace treaty being offered after a war you did not realize had been pointless the whole time. Both sides put down their weapons. The voice slowly understands it has another option besides cruelty. You slowly understand you have another option besides arguing back. A new kind of inner climate becomes possible, not by force, but by the long, slow work of patience. There is something the old commentaries say about this kind of patience that is worth carrying with you. They say that patience with the mind is not separate from love for the mind. The patience itself is the love. The willingness to sit in the clearing, hour after hour, without grasping at the creature, is what the love looks like in practice. Anyone can love a docile mind. Patience is what love looks like when the mind in question has been wild for 30 years. What the patience makes possible in the next teaching is something larger than the inner climate. The work you have just been doing on yourself is also, in a precise way, the work you are doing on behalf of every person you love. 2 acrobats balanced on a long bamboo pole are about to make this very clear. The question that has run underneath every teaching so far is whether caring for yourself takes anything away from the people you love. The Buddha answered that question in the smallest story in the canon. 2 acrobats, 1 pole, fewer than 50 words. The story is in the Sutta Nikaya. A teacher tells his student to watch out for him so they can perform safely. The student, respectfully, says no. You watch out for yourself. I will watch out for myself. That way, we both come down from the pole alive. The Buddha, hearing the story, says the student was right. Then he says the line that changes the structure of every relationship you have ever had. Protecting oneself, one protects others. Protecting others, one protects oneself. This teaching gives you three things before it ends. The structural reason your self-care is also care for the people you love. The honest naming of what has been happening when you have been carrying everyone. And the precise reframe that lets the carrying stop being a slow leak. If you have spent your life carrying everyone, this teaching has been waiting for you for 2,500 years. The popular framing of selflessness imagines that the good person sacrifices their own balance for everyone else's. The Buddha's framing says the opposite, for a precise reason. A person who has lost their own balance becomes a danger to everyone they are trying to hold up. Their good intentions are still real. The physics has stopped working. You have been doing what the older acrobats suggested. You have been watching out for everyone, managing balances that were not yours to manage, running across the pole to steady someone else's foot at the cost of your own. The leak shows up in places no one talks about. A patience that wears thin earlier in the evening than it used to. A small, private edge in the voice during conversations you used to be steady in. A delay between hearing a friend's news and being able to feel anything about it. A growing reluctance to pick up the phone, followed by guilt about the reluctance, followed by the call being made anyway. Each of those small leaks is the body telling you, in its own language, that the carrying has been costing more than the giving has been replacing. The Buddha's correction is precise. Watch your own feet. Trust the people you love to watch theirs. When you both do, the performance becomes possible. When you do not, it ends sooner than either of you wanted. Self-care, in this teaching, is structural. It is the only way you and the people you love can both arrive at the end of a long week alive. Try the reframe on something specific from your own week. The colleague who needed an extra 40 minutes of your attention when you had already given them 3 hours that day. The friend who texted late and expected the long reply you have been giving them for years. The family member whose mood you have been managing in advance all afternoon because you have learned what their mood does to a room. Each of those moments is a small place where the older acrobat's instruction has been running. Each is a place where the younger acrobat's correction can begin to operate quietly, without any drama. A different 40 minutes, a different reply, a different way of meeting the family member's mood that does not require you to absorb it before they arrive. If you have been wondering whether all this attention to yourself is somehow taking away from the people who need you, the answer is the opposite. Every minute you spend tonight noticing your own breath, noticing your own feeling tone, letting the harsh voice quieten, is a minute of steadiness you will be able to bring tomorrow to the people who rely on you. Most careful people never make this pivot. They keep running across the pole until something gives. A health event, a relationship that finally splinters under the strain of being unevenly held. A burnout that arrives wearing the clothes of an ordinary tired week until one morning the body refuses to get out of bed. The Buddha gave the acrobats teaching for the people who would otherwise meet that morning. The teaching is preventive, not theoretical. Every minute of self-care you choose tonight is a minute the body does not have to take by force later on. This is the structural meaning of the 4 phrases you offered yourself earlier. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be at ease. May I be free from suffering. Each phrase is also a steadying of the pole. When you become safer, the people next to you become safer. When you become well, the people next to you can lean on something well. When you become at ease, the room around you becomes a little easier to be in. There is also a beautiful note in the early commentaries about this teaching. The 4 foundations of mindfulness, body, feelings, mind, and the elements of experience, are like 4 guardians, one at each corner of the pole. When you attend to all 4 in yourself, you become someone whose presence steadies the pole for everyone. When you attend to none of them, you become a wobble that propagates. This is the answer to the question that has been just beneath the surface of this entire video. Self-care is not a luxury you have to earn after taking care of everyone else. Self-care is the foundation that makes everything else stable. You are not allowed to wait until everyone else is fine before tending to your own balance. Everyone else's stability depends on yours, in a way the older acrobat in the story was about to forget until his student reminded him. Notice what this changes in the texture of every relationship. Tending to your own breath stops being an abandonment of the people you love. Taking the rest you need stops being a betrayal of the people who depend on you. Saying no to a request that would have unbalanced you becomes the same act as saying yes to the long-term well-being of the entire pole. This is also the moment to recognize something quietly, in the privacy of your own listening. The people you love are not as fragile as the older acrobat assumed. They have their own feet. They have their own balance, their own attention, their own capacity to manage what is theirs to manage. When you have been the one running across the pole, it is sometimes hard to believe this about the people you have been steadying. The teaching trusts them more than you have been allowed to trust them. Some of them have been quietly waiting for you to finally watch your own feet, so that they could stop watching theirs through you. There is one more thing the canon adds in the next sentence after the parable. The Buddha says that one protects others through patience, harmlessness, loving kindness, and sympathy. Notice the order. Patience first. The patience you have been cultivating with your own inner voice in the previous teaching is also, from this angle, a gift to everyone you will speak to tomorrow. A patient inner climate produces a patient outer climate. Calm in your own house extends, in measurable degrees, into every house you walk into. The image of the two figures is worth keeping in the body for the rest of the video. When the next conversation arrives, the next request, the next person who needs something from you, imagine the pole beneath you both. Imagine your own balance as the work you are doing on their behalf. Imagine the small, wise voice of the younger acrobat saying, simply, "Watch your own feet. Trust me to watch mine." There is a quieter consequence of this teaching that becomes visible only over months. The people you love begin to relax around you in a way they have not in years. They sense, without being told, that you are no longer absorbing their moods on their behalf. They begin to do their own balancing. Some of them rise to the responsibility quickly. Some take a few weeks. A small number adjust slowly, with confusion about why the careful one has changed shape. All of them, over time, become slightly more themselves than they were when you were carrying them. The pole steadies in ways the older acrobat could not have imagined when he asked his student to watch out for him. What follows from this, in the next teaching, is the wider weather. Bamboo poles do not balance in still air. Praise lifts you. Blame knocks you sideways. Gain rises and falls. Loss arrives whether or not you were ready. The Buddha had a precise teaching for the 8 kinds of weather that pass through every life, and how to stay on the pole when they arrive. That teaching is the next door. You have been keeping a scoreboard. Most careful people have. The score is whether the people you love are happy with you, whether they thanked you, whether they noticed, whether they called back. The Buddha had a precise teaching for anyone who has been living by that scoreboard. He named 8 kinds of weather that pass through every life and showed why the weather is the wrong place to anchor a life. The score has been running in the background of every conversation you have had this week. A friend's tone of voice you replayed for an hour after the call. A small look in someone's face you have been interpreting since Tuesday. A delay in a reply that the careful mind built into a story about whether you have been forgotten. Each of those moments was an entry on the scoreboard. Each was a small judgment on whether you matter today. The teaching is in the Anguttara Nikaya, in a sutta called the Lokavipatti. 8 conditions pass through every life. Praise and blame. Gain and loss. Fame and disrepute. Pleasure and pain. 8 wins. All of them old. All of them outside your control. The wise see all 8 as impermanent. The unwise are exalted by the favourable 4 and crushed by the unfavourable 4. The wind itself is not the ground they are standing on. That is the entire teaching words that follow are for the person who has been mistaking the wind for the ground. This teaching gives you 3 things before it ends. The honest naming of the scoreboard you have been keeping. The reason the scoreboard guarantees your exhaustion. And the small daily move that lets the score stop being kept. For the careful one, the 8 wins are not abstract. A passing compliment in a meeting earlier this week, and a small, warm lift in the chest. A missed thank you, a small criticism, the sense that someone you helped is mildly displeased, and a small, tight drop in the chest. Your sense of yourself has been weather dependent for a long time. The weather has been the verdict on whether you matter. This is not a personality flaw. It is the simple consequence of having tied your sense of worth to other people's responses. If you have been the one carrying everyone, the responses are the only feedback you have been getting on whether the carrying is working. Did they thank you? Did they notice? Did they smile? Did they call back? The score has been the only thing telling you whether you are doing the work right. There is a particular shape that grows in a person who has been keeping this scoreboard for decades. A kind of permanent low-grade vigilance. The mind always half watching the next reaction in the room. The body always slightly ready to absorb whatever the verdict is going to be. The shape is so familiar to the careful one that it does not feel like vigilance anymore. It feels like personality. It feels like who you are. The Buddha's teaching is that it is not who you are. It is what the scoreboard has been doing to who you are. The 8 wins teaching is the way out of the scoreboard. Not the way out of caring, which the Buddha was not interested in. The way out of needing the score. Here is the precise reason the scoreboard guarantees your exhaustion. The wind blows in 8 directions and has done so since before any human you know was born. Every careful one in history has experienced the same 8 conditions. Some of the people you have helped will thank you. Others will not. A few will resent you for helping at all. Some will be silent in a way you cannot interpret. The Buddha, in another sutta, noted that everyone in his order received praise and blame in equal measure, regardless of how they behaved. Even the Buddha was criticized. Even the Buddha was sometimes ignored. If the wind did not exempt him, it will not exempt you. For the careful one, the implication is large. No amount of being more available will stop the unfavorable winds. No amount of being more attentive will guarantee the thank yous. No amount of carrying the room will make it reliably approve of you. The strategy you have been running has a ceiling. The ceiling is the 8 winds themselves. Once you see the ceiling clearly, the strategy stops looking like virtue. It starts looking like a quiet form of self-harm. This is the precise reason you have been so tired. You have been working very hard for a scoreboard that was never going to settle on you in your favor. No matter how careful you are, the 8 winds will keep blowing. Some weeks the wind will be at your back. Some weeks it will be in your face. Both are temporary. The exhaustion comes from running every day to keep the favorable wind blowing. The Dhammapada says it in one image. As a solid rock is not shaken by the wind, so the wise are not shaken by praise or blame. The rock is not pretending, the wind is not blowing. The rock is just rock. Heavy enough. Already where it is supposed to be. The rock is also patient. It does not require the wind to stop. It does not negotiate. It simply does not move when the wind moves. The rock is what the careful one becomes when the score stops being kept. The question for the careful one is what makes a person rock-shaped. The answer is everything that has happened in this video so far. The body that has been treated kindly by its inhabitant. The mind that has been spoken to with patience. The feelings that have been allowed to rise and pass without being grasped. The sense of self that no longer needs the thank you to know it has done good. All of these, together, are what makes the rock. Here is the practical move. When you notice a wind beginning to move you, name it inwardly. Praise, blame, gain, loss. The naming itself creates a small step backwards from the wind. You are no longer inside the gust. You are noticing the gust from a place that is slightly steadier than the gust. Over weeks, the naming becomes automatic. The wind starts, the name appears, the body softens around the gust instead of bending under it. After a few weeks of naming the wind, something quieter shifts. The praise lands and you receive it without rehearsing it for an hour afterwards. The blame lands and you do not lose the rest of the day to it. The neutral hour is allowed to be a neutral hour with nothing added. The body learns there is a place to stand that is not the wind. The place is small at first, a few square inches of inner ground. Over months it widens. Over years it becomes the floor of your inner life. This teaching is also a quiet correction to the harsh inner voice from earlier. The voice has been keeping score for years. Its only metric for whether you are worth caring for has been other people's responses. When the 8 conditions come into view, the voice loses the only metric it had. The score no longer means what the voice thought it meant. Your worth is no longer up for renegotiation each Tuesday afternoon at 3. Notice what this changes in the texture of every relationship you have been keeping score in. A friend's silence becomes, for the first time, just a friend's silence. Their silence is not a comment on your worth. Their silence is what is happening in their week, which has very little to do with you. A colleague's irritation is not a verdict. Their irritation is the weather inside their body that day. When the score stops being kept, other people's moods stop being readings of your value. They become what they always were, moods, passing through other people's bodies, shaped by hundreds of conditions you cannot see. If this teaching feels distant tonight, notice the body's response to it. There may be a small loosening in the shoulders at the suggestion that you do not have to keep score anymore. There may be an old, tired sense of relief at the implication that the missed thank yous of the past few years were not the verdicts they felt like at the time. The body knows what the teaching is offering before the mind can articulate it. Notice that the Buddha did not say the wise are immune to the 8 winds. Immunity is not what is on offer. The wise person feels every gust. The praise still warms. The blame still stings. The loss still aches. What changes is what the wind means. For the unwise, the wind is a verdict on whether their existence is worth keeping. For the wise, the wind is just wind, blowing through a life that is already settled into its own ground. What the 8 conditions reveal, in the next teaching, is one specific practical move that becomes possible when the score is no longer being kept. A small word. 2 letters, in English. A word your body has been asking you to say for a very long time, while your mind has been talking it out of you. The next teaching gives that word back to you. Yesterday, the word yes came out of your mouth before your body had finished the question. Someone asked something of you. A favor, a stretch of time, a piece of attention you did not actually have to give. The yes was already on its way before the question fully landed. It was the trained yes. The default yes. The yes that has been the structure of your life for so long that no one, including you, registers it as a choice anymore. The body noticed. The body always notices. Somewhere in the chest, the moment the yes left your mouth, there was a small, tight registering, the kind that says, "We cannot really do that. The calendar will not hold. We are already past the line we were trying to hold this week." The body said no in the language it has. The mouth had already said yes in the language the body does not speak. The mouth had been answering for the body for so long that the body had stopped expecting to be consulted. Picture the day differently. An email arrives at 4 p.m. asking you to take on a piece of work that is not yours. A friend texts at 9 p.m. and the trained yes is already drafting the long reply. A family member assumes you will handle the thing nobody wants to handle this weekend. Each of those is a moment when the trained yes has been running the conversation on the body's behalf, while the body sits silent at the back of the room. This teaching gives you 3 things before it ends. The Buddhist framing for why declining is the first work of the path. The single breath of practice that interrupts the trained yes. And the small daily move that gives the body its vote back. The Buddha placed this work 7th on his 8-step path. He called it samma, vayama, right effort. The Vibhanga Sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya names 4 kinds of right effort: preventing unwholesome states from arising, abandoning unwholesome states that have already arisen, cultivating wholesome states that have not yet arisen, maintaining wholesome states that are already present. Notice that the first 2 are forms of refusal. Preventing, abandoning. The Buddha placed the work of declining ahead of the work of cultivating for a practical reason. If you do not know how to decline what is already exhausting you, the work of cultivating new wholesome states has nowhere to land. So the small word the body has been asking for is, in the canon's own framing, the very first work of the path. Not a moral failure for not yet being able to say it. A practice. A trained capacity. Something that builds slowly, the way any skill builds, through repetition and patience. Most of us learned the trained, yes, very early. We learned that being agreeable was how we kept the people around us calm. We absorbed the lesson that saying no produced a temporary discomfort in the room that we did not want to be responsible for. So we said yes, over and over, for years, until the muscle for no had atrophied. The muscle is still there. It is just out of shape. The atrophy has a cost the body has been quietly paying. Resentment that has nowhere to go, because saying no would have prevented the resentment in the first place. Tiredness that builds across years, because every yes that should have been a no costs something the body cannot recover quickly. A growing distance between what you actually want and what you actually do. The careful one does not always notice the distance growing. The body notices. The body has been logging every entry. The work of the daily no begins very small. You do not need to overhaul your relationships. You do not need to send anyone a long letter explaining what you will and will not do anymore. You need only to start noticing the trained yes the moment it begins to form, and to give yourself one breath before it leaves your mouth. One breath is the practice. Inside that one breath, the body has time to send up its actual report. Yes, we can do that this week. No, we cannot. Yes, but only if I move 2 other things. No, not this time. The breath gives the body a vote it has not been allowed to cast for years. Once you have the breath, the no becomes simpler than you expected. No, I cannot do that this week. No, I am not able to take that on. No, I am going to step back from that one. Notice that the no does not require an essay. It does not require a justification. It can stand on its own as a complete sentence. Most people who have lived as the careful one have a particular fear about the no. The fear is that the people who depend on them will not understand, or will be hurt, or will be angry. Some of them will be. A few will not understand the first time. A few will be confused that the trained yes is not arriving at the moment it usually does. What practitioners eventually report, after some weeks of saying no, is that the people who matter adjust. They learn the new shape of you. The relationships that were healthy survive the no. The relationships that were not healthy were going to need to change anyway. This is right effort in operation. It is also right speech, in a quiet way. The Buddha was specific about right speech. True, kind, useful, and timely. The trained yes was sometimes none of those things. The honest no, spoken without cruelty, meets all four. There is a quieter shift that practitioners report after a few weeks of saying no. The voice itself sounds different. It loses the small upward lift it used to carry, the one that turned every sentence into a question for the listener's approval. It becomes, by small degrees, a voice that lives somewhere underneath the throat instead of in front of the mouth. Friends notice the change before the careful one does. They cannot quite name it. What they hear is a person who has begun to take up the right amount of room in the conversation. The Padana Sutta in the Sutta Nipata has a beautiful line about effort. My effort is firm. My mindfulness is established. My body is calm. The line was spoken by someone facing a much harder kind of resistance than a daily refusal. The sequence is exactly right. The body becomes calm only after mindfulness has been established. Mindfulness can be established only when the effort is firm, without being strained. The right effort holds steady without becoming a fight. That is also true of the daily no. The no is not a fight. The no is not a moral position you are taking. The no is a calm, firm, kind sentence delivered from a body that has finally been allowed to vote. No drama. No long explanation. No apology that undoes the no on its way out. Let yourself try one in the next few days. A small one. Choose a request you would normally agree to without thinking. Notice the trained yes preparing to leave your mouth. Take one breath. Let the body cast its actual vote. If the body votes no, say so, simply, kindly, without elaborate apology. Notice the small, almost surprising sense of being on your own side that follows. The first few times will feel awkward. The voice in your head will tell you that you have just done something wrong. You have not. You have done the 7th step of the 8-fold path. The voice will quieten over time as the practice becomes habit. There is a small, practical detail worth holding. Many people who begin saying no swing the pendulum too far. They say no to everything for a few weeks as a kind of corrective. The corrective is understandable. The practice is discernment. Some yeses still belong in your life. Some are wholesome. Some give you energy rather than taking it. The work is letting the body's actual vote be heard each time and acting on that vote. There is also a quieter version of the no that the canon does not name explicitly, but practitioners discover quickly. The half no. No, I cannot do that this week, but I can do a smaller version of it next week. No, I cannot stay on the call for an hour, but I can stay for 15 minutes. No, I cannot take the whole project, but I can take this part of it. The half no honors the body's capacity while keeping the relationship alive. It is the practical middle path, sized to the request that is actually being made. There is a quieter consequence of the daily no that becomes visible only over time. Each time you say no in alignment with the body's actual report, something inside you registers that you are listening. The body learns that the inhabitant is paying attention to its votes. A real trust begins to form between you and the body that has been doing the carrying. That trust, repeated over many small refusals, is what eventually settles the chronic small ache that has been there for years. The body stops bracing against being overruled by the very person who lives inside it. What follows from the daily no in the next teaching is harder than the no itself. Resting from the kindness you owe yourself. Letting even the practice of self-care be allowed to rest when you are tired of practicing, without that rest becoming a betrayal of the practice. The Attavagga of the Dhammapada has the next line, and it sounds like a friend. One is one's own protector. What other protector could there be? With self well disciplined, one obtains a protector hard to find. That is verse 160 of the Dhammapada from the chapter on the self. Read it again, in your own voice this time. One is one's own protector. What other protector could there be? With self well disciplined, one obtains a protector hard to find. This verse arrives after the daily no, like a friend's text in the middle of a long week. It is not asking anything of you. It is naming a fact your body already knows. This teaching gives you 3 things before it ends. The reason the careful one is the only protector who has ever actually been available to you. The Buddhist permission to rest from the practice itself when the practice has started to feel like another job. And the small daily image that lets the kindness become yours. You are your own protector. No one outside this body is going to do the daily, moment-to-moment work of being on your own side. Other people can love you. Many already do. Some of them can support you in the ways available to them. The actual work of inhabiting yourself kindly is the one job no one else has access to. This sounds like a heavy responsibility. It is the opposite. The reason the verse calls the protector hard to find is that most people spend their lives looking outside themselves for what only they can offer themselves. Someone to validate them, someone to reassure them, someone to confirm daily that they are worth the trouble. The verse is offering an alternative. The protector you have been looking for has been the inhabitant of this body all along. Now here is the part of the teaching that often gets missed. The protector is also someone who needs rest. The voice in your head over the past 9 teachings has probably been quietly converting all of this into another kind of demand. Now I have to do the 4 phrases. Now I have to notice my feeling tone. Now I have to be patient with my inner critic. Now I have to say no. The voice has been turning the practice into another job for the careful one to perform. That conversion is the thing the Attavaga of the Dhammapada is gently pushing back against. The verses in the Attavaga are not heroic. They are quiet. They are the Buddha at his most informal, almost private, talking to the practitioner about the kind of self-discipline that makes life lighter rather than heavier. The Pali word for self-discipline in this verse is closer to inhabiting than punishing. Showing up. Being a kind tenant in your own house. The discipline is staying. Here is what staying looks like on a tired night. You skip the 4 phrases tonight because you are too exhausted to find them. The voice tries to make you feel guilty about it. You notice the voice, the way the earlier teachings trained you to, and you do not engage with it. You go to bed. The next morning, if there is space, the 4 phrases are there waiting, not offended, not requiring an apology. That, in the canon's own logic, is the practice. The practice does not ask for perfect performance. What it asks is that you keep returning, at whatever pace your body can manage, in whatever shape today allows. The Buddha gave a famous teaching for this in the Majjhima Nikaya, the simile of the raft. The Dharma, the Buddha said, is like a raft you build to cross a river. Once you have crossed, you do not carry the raft on your back for the rest of your journey. You leave it and walk on. The Attavaga extends the same logic to the daily practice. The 4 phrases are a raft. The Vedana work is a raft. The patience with the inner critic is a raft. All of them are useful for crossing whatever you are crossing tonight. They are not meant to be carried on your back as an extra weight. Most careful people unknowingly carry the raft. They turn every practice into something that must be done correctly, done daily, done in the right order, documented in some quiet inner ledger. The ledger is the raft on the back. The Buddha is offering you the option of putting the raft down between river crossings instead of building a life out of perpetually transporting it. The hardest part of self-care for the careful one is letting the self-care also be allowed to fail occasionally. Letting yourself skip the practice on a hard day. Letting yourself eat the comforting thing without scolding yourself. Letting yourself spend a Saturday doing nothing, with no particular goal, without the voice in your head treating that Saturday as a moral failure. The Buddha was specific about this in another verse from the same chapter. By oneself is evil done. By oneself is one defiled. By oneself is evil left undone. By oneself is one purified. The verses sound severe in translation. The meaning is steady. No one outside you can rescue you. No one outside you can ruin you. The work is yours. Which means, on a tired Tuesday, the work is also yours to set down for the evening. Setting it down looks like very small things. Going to bed without doing the practice, on the night your body cannot find it, and not waking up the next morning believing the night was a failure. Eating something the voice would have lectured about, and noticing the lecture without believing it. Spending an hour doing nothing in the middle of a day without a productive purpose attached. Each of those small permissions is the practice of letting the practice rest. The Buddha gave it as much weight as the practice itself. This is the moment in the video where the practice becomes, in a precise way, yours. Not the channels. Not the canons. Not the Buddhas. Yours. You can take what is useful and leave the rest. The 4 phrases can be shaped in your own words. The timing can change. One practice can carry you in a hard week and another in a quiet week. The protector hard to find is the one quietly running this part of your life. Letting the protector rest is a teaching the body recognizes before the mind does. The body has spent years working past its own exhaustion for jobs that were not always the body's to do. Now, with the practice loosening, the body begins to feel that someone in here is willing to let it rest without scolding it for the rest. The shoulders settle a degree further. The lower back releases a tightness it had not known it was holding. The breath finds a longer pace, not because you trained it to, but because nothing is asking it to be shorter. There is a small image worth carrying out of this teaching. Imagine a candle in a window of a house you have been walking toward in the dark. The candle does not demand anything of you. The candle does not require you to walk faster. The candle is just on, staying lit, waiting for you to arrive. The protector inside this body is the candle. Whether you arrive at the door tonight or tomorrow morning, the candle is on. Self-care, at this depth, is the willingness to keep the candle lit for yourself at whatever brightness you can manage on any given day. There is something the careful one will only notice after a few weeks of letting the candle stay lit at whatever brightness it manages. The brightness becomes less interesting. Whether the practice was strong today or thin today stops being the measurement that defines the day. What becomes the measurement is whether the candle stayed lit at all. The standard the careful one has been holding themselves to lowers in the right direction. Lower in the sense of more humane, more survivable, more like a life that a person can actually live for many years on end. What follows from this, in the next teaching, is something that becomes possible only when you stop carrying the practice as a job. The work begins to ripple outward. The people in your life start to feel different. The relationships that had been strained begin to ease, not because anyone outside you has changed, but because the kindness you have started giving yourself has changed the climate of every room you walk into. The next teaching is about the precise way that climate begins to choose your friends for you. There is probably a name in your mind right now. Someone has come into focus while these teachings have been unfolding. A particular person you keep showing up for. A friend who calls more than they should. A family member whose moods set the temperature of every gathering. A colleague, a partner, an old connection that has, in the last few months, begun to feel less like a relationship and more like a job. You did not bring the name into the room on purpose. The mind brought it while you were busy with the breath. Notice it. Do not push it away. The fact that this particular name surfaced now is part of the teaching about to arrive. The Buddha had a precise word for the kind of friendship that supports the path. Mettā. Translated literally, beautiful friend, or admirable friend, or true friend. What the word names is not just companionship. It names the kind of person whose company makes the wholesome states stronger and the unwholesome states weaker. This teaching gives you 3 things before it ends. The Buddha's surprising correction to Ananda about how much of the path is friendship. The honest test for which relationships have been making you stronger and which have been wearing you out. And the most important Mettā you will ever have access to, who has been quietly waiting for you to notice all along. There is a famous moment in the Samyutta Nikaya, in a sutta called the Upadada Sutta, where the Buddha's attendant Ananda said something he had clearly been thinking about. He said that admirable friendship was half of the holy life. To walk with Mettā, Ananda thought, is to be halfway through the practice. The Buddha, with characteristic precision, corrected him. He said, "No, Ananda. Admirable friendship is not half the holy life. It is the whole of the holy life." Sit with that for a moment. The Buddha, who was not given to overstatement, said the company you keep is the entire path. Not most of it. Not the social part of it. The whole. This is because the company you keep shapes, over years, what kind of mind you have. The voice in your head is not only the inheritance from your earliest caregivers. It is also the slow accumulation of every conversation you have been part of since. The friends who have been kind have softened your inner voice in ways you cannot quite measure. The friends who have been harsh have made the harsh voice slightly louder in ways you also cannot quite measure. The mind is shaped by the rooms it spends time in. For the careful one, this teaching has a quiet, uncomfortable bite. It asks the question you have probably been avoiding. Among the people you have been carrying, who has been carrying you? Who has, in any noticeable way, made you stronger, kinder, more rested, more yourself? Take a slow look at the last few months. Whose calls have left you lighter and whose drained? Whose name on a screen brings a small lift and whose a small drop? The body has been keeping notes on this all along. The careful mind has been ignoring the notes in the name of being a good friend to everyone equally. The body's notes are the more honest record. This is not an exercise in resentment. The teaching is not asking you to make a list of people who have failed you. Most of them have not failed. They have been doing what they were able to do with the inner resources they had. What the teaching is asking is whether you have been choosing your circle or whether your circle has been choosing itself by default, through habit, through old loyalties, through the long-running role you have played. The Buddhist canon is more direct about this than the modern world tends to be. The Sigalovada Sutta, a long discourse on lay relationships, describes the marks of a true friend in plain language. A true friend is one who helps you, who is the same in joy and in sorrow, who tells you what is good for you, and who has compassion for you. The Buddha then describes, with equal directness, the marks of the false friend. One who takes everything, who flatters you in your face and criticizes you behind your back, who is your friend only when there is something to be gained. The text is not subtle. It does not require interpretation. Notice that the canon assumes you are allowed to make the distinction. The Buddha did not believe loyalty meant tolerating treatment that eroded you. He named the categories so his students could see them clearly and adjust accordingly. Adjustment did not have to mean cutting people off in dramatic ways. It often meant a quiet change in how much access someone had to you. A relationship that used to take 5 hours a week could, over time, take 2. A daily call could become a weekly one. A friendship could remain a friendship while changing shape. This is what the practice has been quietly preparing you for. The Mettā for yourself. The Vedana work. The patience with the inner critic. The daily no. All of it has been creating the inner ground from which honest discernment becomes possible. Without that ground, any change in your relationships would have felt like cruelty. With it, the same change becomes simply the sentence, "This person and I have grown into different shapes, and the friendship needs to find its new size." Changing shape rarely needs an announcement. Most relationships adjust through the quiet maths of who replies first, who suggests the next meeting, who lets a silence sit. The careful one, in the past, has done all of that work for both people. The new practice is to do only your half. Reply when you have the energy. Reach out when you actually want to. Let the silences sit without rushing in to fill them. The relationships that are real settle into a sustainable rhythm. The ones that were not real reveal themselves. Letting people be where they are is one of the most loving things this teaching asks of you. Some of the people you have been carrying are not asking to be carried. They are perfectly capable of carrying themselves. Your habit of running across the pole has meant they have not had to. When you stop, they may stumble for a few weeks while their own balance returns. They may also, over time, become a little more themselves. There is a quiet kindness in this teaching toward the people you may need to release. Letting them go is not a verdict on their worth as people. They are dearest to themselves, as the third teaching established. They have their own paths, their own teachers, their own work to do. Holding on past the natural end of a relationship can be its own quiet form of harm to both of you. Letting go, when it is time, is sometimes the kindest thing either of you will do for the other. This may mean, for you, a quiet, private choice in the next few weeks. Spending more time with the friend who is steady and honest, and less time with the one who keeps you anxious. Picking up the phone for the colleague who is becoming a real friend, and letting the colleague who only calls when they need something wait a little longer for a response. The choice is not punishment. The choice is about where the limited hours of your life go. There is one more piece of this teaching worth holding, and it is the most important one. The most reliable Kalyana Mettā you will ever have access to is the one inside your own body. The voice you have been training to be patient. The body you have been listening to. The protector you met in the previous teaching. Becoming your own admirable friend is not a metaphor. It is the prerequisite for everything else. When you become someone whose own company you can stand, the question of which other companies belong in your life answers itself. The people who are like the you that you are becoming will recognize you and gather close. The people who needed the version of you who never said no will quietly adjust, drift, or stay in a smaller orbit than they used to occupy. The circle becomes, over months, the kind of circle the Buddha had in mind when he told Ananda that admirable friendship was the whole of the path. What is left now, in the final teaching, is the simplest move of all. Coming home to the one in the room. Returning to the body you started in, with the small, ordinary breath that has been with you the whole time, and meeting the words the Buddha left as his closing instruction to anyone who would listen. Be a refuge unto yourselves. That sentence is from one of the last things the Buddha said. The Mahaparinibbana Sutta records his final months. He was old. He was tired. He knew he would not be there much longer to answer questions. Ananda, who had been with him for decades, was distraught at the thought of losing him. The Buddha looked at his closest student and gave him a sentence in Pali that has been preserved for 2,500 years. Attadipa viharatha. Be lamps unto yourselves. Be your own refuge. Take no other refuge. Pause on the situation. An old man in his last weeks, with disciples who had built their lives around him. The expected sentence was, "Stay close, follow the path I have laid down." What he said instead was the opposite of attachment to him. Be your own light. Hold no other refuge. The teaching was the most respectful thing he could offer them. He trusted them with their own minds. This was the last instruction from the most patient teacher in the canon. After everything he had ever said, after the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, the long teaching collections that fill thousands of pages, what he left his students with was a single, simple sentence that fit on a small piece of paper. The teaching is yours now. The refuge is in you. This teaching gives you three things before it ends. The reason this sentence from the Buddha is the integration of every previous teaching in this video. The honest naming of who you have been waiting for all this time. And the small, almost imperceptible recognition that the work is yours and that everything you need is already in the room. This is what the previous 11 teachings have been quietly preparing for. The first honest look. The understanding of why kindness toward yourself feels foreign. The Buddha's reply to a tired old householder. The 4 phrases of Mettā. The mindfulness of feeling. The patience with the inner critic. The acrobats on the bamboo pole. The 8 winds. The daily no. The permission to rest from the practice. The discernment of admirable friendship. Each of those teachings was in the service of this one quiet recognition. Be a refuge unto yourselves. Notice what is left in the body after that sentence has settled. The room is still around you. The chair is still under you. The breath is still rising and falling under whatever hand is on whatever chest tonight. Nothing has been added. Something quiet has been confirmed. You have been the refuge all along. The body you have been ignoring is the refuge. The breath you have been moving past is the refuge. The voice you have been training, degree by degree, to be patient is the refuge. The kindness you have just spent the last few hours quietly returning to is the refuge. Nothing outside this body is going to be more reliable than what is already in here. The sentence is also, in the canon's own framing, a teaching of profound humility. The Buddha did not say, "Follow my teachings forever." He did not say, I will always be available. He did not even say, trust the lineage that comes after me. What he said was that the work is yours, and you have everything you need to do it. This is the teaching that completes the entire pilgrimage of the previous 11. The question that opened this video some hours ago was about the person who cares for everyone but themselves. The teaching has been, from the first sentence, that the one being cared for is also the one in the chair. Tonight, the chair is yours. The chest under your hand is yours. The voice that has been training itself toward kindness is yours. The friend the Buddha was pointing at all along has been the inhabitant of this body. For the careful one, the recognition has a particular weight. All these years of waiting for someone to finally see you, remember you, thank you, look after you, were a long way of looking outside the room you were already in. The Buddha's last instruction returns the search to its actual address. The one who is dearest to you is the one whose breath you can hear under your own ribs. The one who can show up for that person is the same one. They have been the same all along. There is something quiet that happens when this lands. A small, almost private settling. The body recognizes the teaching before the mind articulates it. An old kind of tiredness lifts a degree. The shoulders set down a weight they had been carrying for so long that the carrying had become the resting position. The room becomes, for a few breaths, unmistakably enough. Notice, if you can, what the body has done while you have been listening. The hand is probably still on the chest, or has settled into the lap in the way bodies do when they have been treated kindly for a stretch of time. The breath has slowed without being instructed to. The room is quieter than it was at the start. The voice that began this video a couple of hours ago was already worn out from carrying everyone. The voice that is in the room now is the same voice, still carrying the same people in its life, but holding a slightly different idea of what carrying them means. You may notice that the harsh voice has gone quiet. Not silenced, just quiet for a few breaths, the way a forest creature goes still when it realizes no one is chasing it anymore. The voice will return tomorrow. When it does, the practices are here. The breath is here. The hand is here. The 4 phrases are here. The Vedana work is here. The patient meeting is here. The daily no is here. The friendship with yourself is here. The refuge is here. This is the meaning of the Buddha's last instruction. Everything you need is already in the room with you. The teaching has made this visible. Nothing has been added. The attention has been turned to what was already true. For someone who has spent their life caring for everyone, there is a final relief in this teaching that is hard to describe. You are no longer at the mercy of whether other people remember to take care of you. You are no longer dependent on whether the friend calls back, the colleague says thank you, The family member registers what you have been carrying. The kindness you have been giving is also the kindness you can give yourself. The well that has been dry for years is being refilled by you directly. This does not mean you stop receiving care from others. It means you are no longer waiting for it to begin existing in you. When kindness comes from outside, it is welcome. When it does not come, the supply has not run out. The supply is the body you have been quietly tending to all along. The supply looks small. A breath that takes a little longer. A meal without a lecture. A no you let stand. A small kindness you offer yourself the way you offer it to a friend. Each is the refuge in operation. The refuge is not visible from the outside. It is what is happening inside the body that has finally let itself be cared for. There is also, in this teaching, a quiet permission for everything that is still unfinished in you. The work is not done. The work will not be done in this lifetime, for anyone. What this teaching offers is not arrival, but orientation. A direction the body knows how to walk in, even on tired days. The refuge is not a place you reach. The refuge is the body you walk in. What the Buddha gave Ananda in that final teaching is the same thing he is giving you here. A hand on the shoulder. A voice saying, "The work is yours. The refuge is in you. You have everything you need. Nothing more is required. Nothing more is being asked." The breath continues. The room continues. The body that has spent its life caring for everyone but itself is, for a few quiet breaths, being cared for by the one in the chair, by the one whose hand is still resting where it has been resting, by the one who has been the refuge all along. The hand can stay where it is. The breath can keep doing what it has been doing on its own all along. The friend on the phone earlier is fine. The parent is fine. The colleague is fine. They have been in good hands the whole time. The hands have been yours. The one who finally received some of the same care tonight is the one whose breath you can hear, if you slow down enough to listen. That breath is steady now. It has been steady the whole time. The teaching has been quiet about this from the beginning. The work was never to become someone else. The work was simply to come home to the one who has been here in the room with you all along. Nothing more is being asked. No instruction to be carried out. Only the body in the chair, the breath in the chest, and the small, almost ordinary feeling of being quietly on your own side for the first time in a very long time. The room is yours. The breath is yours. the kindness is yours. Wherever in the world you are listening from, it is good to be here together.